Hi, sweet YouTube family. Welcome back to the Southern Homestead. So the past few weeks have been somewhat of a roller coaster. We had the Pike County Expo last weekend. We were really busy getting everything ready for that. This week I had to teach a basic sourdough class for the ladies group at our church, and that's somewhat of an ordeal. So I just got through filming a short YouTube class video for them. And I think what I'm going to do this week is I'm going to go ahead and share that video with you all. And that's going to pretty much wrap up the video for this coming week. Because, hey, who doesn't want to learn how to make basic sourdough, right? I'm headed out to the apothecary. I am in the process of dehydrating some more of my sourdough starter. And I'm going to be giving away gift sets to the ladies at the church so that they can go home and create their own sourdough. So I'm going to finish gathering all of my materials and then I'll be all set. Hopefully, if they'll let me film, maybe I can share some of that in the video next week. So sit back and enjoy this basic sourdough class. Hello, ladies of St. Alphonsus Catholic Church. If you don't know me, my name is Tammy Fereday. I have been a member of St. Alphonsus St. James for the past 23 years, maybe. And we actually started out at St. Mary of the Pines in Chattawa, and I'm happy to have you here today. I was asked to do a sourdough class. It's a little tricky because the art of making traditional sourdough does take about 24 hours. So that could be a bit of a challenge in a 1.5 hour to 2 hour class to get everything done. So that's the purpose of this video today, is to try to get as many of the steps into the video as possible. You'll all be given the link to access this video as often as you need to, and just to have as a secure backup for when you're baking your own bread at home. Hopefully I'll have my act together and we'll have dehydrated lots of sourdough starter for all of you to take home. I have instructions that I'll have printed out that'll explain to you exactly how to rehydrate your sourdough starter and get it active so that you can start baking with it. First thing we're going to talk about is what tools do you need to make sourdough. I'll go over a few of them with you in class. I'm going to bring some of mine that I have here at home. Some of these are optional. You don't really need all of the tools that I'm going to show you today, but there are some that you really do need. You'll need some sort of large glass bowl to go ahead and mix your sourdough and flour and water to get it ready. You'll also need some kind of dough whisk. This is a Danish dough whisk and I absolutely love it. Not necessary. You can just use a spatula if you'd like to mix everything together. Like this. I do prefer the dough whisk. Another tool you'll need is a scraper like this. It just helps you when you're shaping the dough, helps you create the tension in the dough, which we'll talk about later. And then also it helps clean up your countertop to get all the sticky dough off. Another tool is called a bread lane. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Kathy, if you're here in the class, let us know if we're pronouncing this correctly, please. It's a bread lane. It's just basically a nice wooden handle with a razor blade on the end, and it's used for scoring the dough. You'll also need a digital scale to measure out your ingredients for the sourdough. Sourdough can be a little tricky, and so this definitely comes in handy. And a good bread knife. Now, you can totally use any serrated bread knife. I picked this up at a Homesteaders conference last year, and honestly, it's one of the best bread knives I've ever had. Not necessary, but it is a good option. And then of course you will also need a sourdough starter. And this is mine here that I keep in the jar. And this is what the sourdough looks like inside the jar. And it's been probably a good 18 hours or so since I fed the starter. If you're making a traditional sourdough boule, which is the round sourdough loaf, then you're going to need a Dutch oven, preferably a heavy cast iron Dutch oven with a lid, and some parchment paper. You'll also need a Banneton basket or a bowl for the proofing process of your dough. And with the Banneton basket or the bowl, you'll actually use a liner, or you can just use a tea towel that you'll coat with flour, and I use a rice flour. And those are all the tools that you will need to make your bread. So before we get started making our bread, it is worth mentioning, I have been making yeast bread for probably 35 years now. I've only been making sourdough bread for about 2 years. And only with the aid of my friend Kathy, who convinced me that sourdough does not have to be all time consuming and does not have to be difficult. And she was right. And so a couple of years ago, we met. She gave me a piece of her sourdough starter. I brought it home. I fed it. I took care of it. She's still going strong. And here we are today. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to first measure out our water that we're going to put in our bowl, and then we're going to go ahead and add our sourdough starter, mix it really well, and then we're going to add the rest of our dry flour to the mix and the salt, and then incorporate it all together into a rough dough ball. So the first thing we're going to add to our bowl is going to be our warm water, not hot, but slightly tepid. I'm going to add about 375 grams or about 1.5 cups of warm water to my bowl. Then we're going to add anywhere from 50 to 100 grams of our sourdough starter, active and bubbly. Now, depending on the temperature in your house is going to determine how much of your sourdough starter you're going to add to the bowl. It's kind of chilly right now in my house, so I'm going to go ahead and add the full 100 grams. If it were summertime and it was warm in your house, then you could probably get away with 50 grams or maybe meet somewhere in the middle around 75 grams. You'll just have to kind of get used to things in your home the more you make the bread. So now I'm just going to go ahead and start mixing it together with my dough whisk, and then I'll be ready to incorporate the flour and the salt. Next, we're going to add our flour, and that's going to be about 500 grams, give or take, of a good bread flour. I am actually running low on bread flour, so I think I may end up doing half bread flour and half all-purpose flour. And we'll see how it turns out. I'm just going to go ahead and measure out my 500 grams before adding it to the bowl. The last thing I'm going to add to the bowl is going to be my sea salt. Do not use iodized salt for this recipe. Make sure you invest in a good sea salt, like a Redmond's Real Salt or a Baja Gold sea salt. Makes all the difference in the world. It's going to be anywhere from 1 to 2 teaspoons. I'll just do about 1.5 teaspoons. And then we're just going to go ahead and start mixing everything together. Once your dough comes together in that rough dough ball, then you're just going to go ahead and wet a tea towel, cover it, and let it sit on the counter for about 30 minutes. After your dough has rested for about 30 minutes or so, then you're going to do your first round of stretch and folds. Now, when I first heard about making sourdough and all of this, that's what really kept me from starting the sourdough process, thinking that it was just going to be this all-day drawn-out thing where you have to do stretch and folds all day long. Well, that's not entirely true. It's only 4 rounds of stretch and folds over the course of about 2 hours. I've done it every 20 minutes instead of every 30 minutes just to kind of speed up the process, and it really didn't make that much of a difference. So, but typically it is every 30 minutes for 2 hours. I like to wet my hands for the first 1 or 2 rounds of stretch and folds because the dough sometimes can be a little sticky, and this will help keep it from sticking to your fingers too much. So you're going to start on one side of the bowl. You're going to dip your hand in up under, grab some of the dough, stretch it up a good 4 to 6 inches or even 8 inches, and then fold it over. Then you're going to rotate the bowl a quarter turn and do the same thing all the way around the bowl. When you're done with the first round of stretch and folds, you're going to cover it with that damp towel again, leave it set on the counter, set your timer for about 30 minutes, and then repeat the process 3 more times. It's been another 30 minutes, so now it's time for round 3 of my stretch and folds. By now, you'll start to notice the change in the texture of the dough as the gluten starts to develop from the stretch and folds. If you're familiar with baking bread at all, like a yeast bread, when you're doing the kneading process by hand, you're actually activating the gluten. The strands of gluten become elongated and elastic. And so that's what you're doing with the stretch and folds in the dough here. We're ready for our 4th and final round of stretch and folds. After that, we're going to cover the dough with a damp towel, and it's going to sit on the counter for the bulk fermentation process. This can take anywhere from 4 hours to 12 hours. You just want the dough to increase by at least 50%. My sourdough has been rising on the counter for about 5 or 6 hours. I'm going to go ahead and turn it out onto the counter. I'm going to do a pre-shape, and then I'm going to put it into my Banneton basket and into the refrigerator where it'll sit overnight. So I've taken the sourdough out of the refrigerator. I'm going to turn it out onto some parchment paper, give it a little score, and then into the Dutch oven it goes. My oven has been preheating along with the Dutch oven and the lid so that everything's nice and hot when the bread goes into the pot. The sourdough is in the oven. It's baking covered for about 30 minutes. And then I'm gonna take the lid off and bake it another 15 to 20 minutes or so. This time is gonna kind of vary depending on the ovens. If your oven runs hot or if your oven runs cool. If you have a gas oven, an electric oven, I have a gas oven. So I'm gonna just keep an eye on it. And then what you can also do, another helpful hint, if it's not the nice golden color that you're wanting, you can take the boule or the loaf out of the Dutch oven and put it directly onto the oven rack for the last 5 to 10 minutes of baking.